Most people would have sold the ring before the rain even stopped. Leah Morgan almost did. The wind whipped through the narrow alley behind the diner as she stepped out the back door just after midnight. Her shift had ended 23 minutes late, which meant the last bus was already gone again. Neon signs reflected across puddles scattered over cracked pavement, turning the wet ground into streaks of red, blue, and gold. Leah pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders and started the 2-mile walk toward her apartment. Chicago felt different after midnight, quieter, colder, like the city was holding its breath. The rain had started as a drizzle during her last table, but now it fell steadily from the dark sky above. Her sneakers splashed through shallow water as she passed dumpsters, loading docks, and shuttered storefronts. The smell of coffee still clung to her uniform. So did exhaustion. She had worked 6 straight days. Rent was due in 4 days. Her checking account contained exactly $84.12. Not that she was counting. She always counted. A gust of wind pushed a newspaper across the alley ahead. Something metallic rolled with it. The object struck the curb and stopped. Leah nearly walked past it. Then a flash of gold caught her eye. She slowed, looked back. The object rested beside a storm drain, half hidden beneath rainwater. For a moment she considered leaving it alone. Then curiosity won. She crouched and reached for it. The ring felt heavier than it looked. Rain dripped from her fingertips as she turned it beneath a nearby streetlight. Gold, real gold, unless her eyes were playing tricks on her. Intricate patterns spiraled around the band. Tiny symbols had been carved into the metal with impossible precision. It looked old, not antique store old, museum old. Leah frowned. Who loses something like this, she murmured. The ring wasn't flashy. There were no diamonds, no gemstones. Yet something about it felt valuable in a way she couldn't explain. She slipped it into her palm and stood. A distant siren echoed somewhere downtown. The rain intensified. She should have kept walking. Instead, she moved beneath an awning and examined the ring again. On the inside of the band, hidden where most people would never notice, was a symbol, a crown, simple, elegant, and beneath the crown sat a single engraved line she couldn't quite read. The lettering looked unfamiliar, not English, not anything she recognized. A chill crawled across the back of her neck. Leah glanced around the empty street. Nobody, just rain, traffic in the distance, the hum of city lights. She laughed softly at herself. It was only a ring. Someone was probably panicking right now, searching every sidewalk between here and wherever they'd dropped it. She knew what it felt like to lose something important. When her father died, she'd spent 3 days searching for the old watch he'd left behind. She never found it. Maybe that was why she slipped the ring into her jacket pocket instead of her purse. Maybe that was why she immediately decided she would find the owner. By the time she reached her apartment building, her hair was soaked and her fingers were numb. The elevator was broken again. 4th floor. She climbed the stairs and entered her tiny apartment. The place wasn't much. 1 room, a kitchenette, a window overlooking a brick wall, but it was hers. Leah placed the ring carefully on the small kitchen table beneath the lamp. The gold caught the light instantly. Even from across the room, it seemed to shine brighter than it should have. She stared at it while heating leftover soup in the microwave. Strange. The word lingered in her thoughts. Not valuable, not expensive. Strange. At that exact moment, less than 3 miles away, a black luxury sedan slowed outside a historic building overlooking Lake Michigan. 3 men stepped from the vehicle. All wore dark coats despite the rain. None looked happy. One of them spoke quietly into a phone. The ring has moved again. A pause followed. Then a response came through the speaker. Calm, deep, controlled. Has anyone claimed it? No, Your Majesty. Silence stretched for several seconds. Rain tapped softly against the car roof. Finally the voice answered. Then continue watching. Back inside her apartment, Leah knew none of this. She sat beside the window, eating soup and scrolling through local lost and found listings. Every few minutes her eyes drifted back toward the ring, toward the strange crown engraved inside, toward the feeling she couldn't explain. Around 1:30 in the morning, she finally turned off the lamp and headed toward bed, but just before she disappeared into darkness, headlights flashed briefly through the rain outside. A black vehicle sat across the street, motionless, waiting, and somewhere inside that car, someone was watching her window. By sunrise, Leah Morgan had checked the local lost and found websites 6 times. None of them mentioned a gold ring with a crown engraved inside. The city outside her apartment window slowly came alive. Delivery trucks rumbled through the streets. Commuters hurried toward train stations with coffee cups in hand. Life moved forward as if nothing unusual had happened. Yet every few minutes her eyes drifted back toward the kitchen table. The ring sat exactly where she had left it, Silent, unmoving, somehow still impossible to ignore. Leah grabbed her diner uniform and headed to work. The morning air carried the sharp smell of rain-soaked pavement. Clouds still hung low over Chicago, turning the skyline gray. 20 minutes later, she pushed through the diner doors and was immediately greeted by the familiar chorus of clattering plates, sizzling bacon and impatient customers. "You look exhausted," her co-worker Emily said while refilling sugar dispensers. "I am exhausted." "Then why do you look like you won the lottery?" Leah laughed. "Trust me, if I won the lottery, I would not be serving pancakes at 7 in the morning." But throughout her shift, the ring remained in the back of her mind. During her lunch break, she pulled out her phone and posted descriptions online. "Lost ring found near West Randolph Street." Described the item to claim ownership. She did not include a photo. Something told her that would be a mistake. By late afternoon, responses began arriving. Most were obvious scams. Some guessed wildly, others claimed ownership but could not describe the symbol inside. Leah deleted every one of them. As the hours passed, she became more determined to find the real owner. Unfortunately, she was not the only one thinking about the ring. Across the city, inside a private office overlooking Lake Michigan, a man studied a digital tablet in silence. Rain tapped gently against floor-to-ceiling windows. The room was enormous, decorated with dark wood, marble, and shelves filled with books older than most countries. On the screen appeared a photograph taken earlier that morning, Leah walking into the diner. Leah posting information online. The man looked calm, almost detached, but his attention never left the screen. "Interesting," he said quietly. An older gentleman standing nearby folded his hands behind his back. "She has ignored every opportunity to profit from it. Most people would not. No, Your Majesty, most people would not." The man said nothing else. His gaze lingered on Leah's image for several seconds longer before the screen went dark. Back at the diner, evening arrived faster than expected. The dinner rush flooded the restaurant with noise and motion. Leah barely had time to think. Then just before 8 o'clock, a customer slid into a corner booth. Nothing about him looked remarkable. Mid-50s, expensive coat, polished shoes. Calm smile. He ordered black coffee and spent 20 minutes reading a newspaper. Then as Leah delivered the check, he looked up. "Excuse me," he said casually. "I heard you found a ring." Leah froze. Only for a second. "I am sorry?" The man smiled wider. Word travels. Conversation felt wrong immediately. Not threatening, just rehearsed. "A lot of people lose things," Leah replied carefully. "Perhaps." He reached into his pocket and produced a business card. No company logo, no name, only a phone number. "If you still have it, I would be willing to purchase it." Leah glanced at the card. "Purchase it for a generous amount. What if it belongs to someone else?" The man stirred his coffee slowly. "Then perhaps they should have been more careful." Leah did not like the answer. She did not like the smile either. "I am trying to find the owner." The man's expression remained pleasant, yet something cold appeared behind his eyes. "That may prove more difficult than you expect." Leah folded the card and slipped it into her apron pocket. "Then I guess I will keep trying." For the first time, the man looked disappointed. Not angry, not frustrated, simply disappointed. He stood, placed a $20 bill on the table. Halfway to the door, he stopped. Without turning around, he spoke one final sentence. "Some things are lost for a reason." Then he disappeared into the evening crowd. Leah watched through the diner window as he crossed the street. A black sedan waited at the curb. The moment he entered, the vehicle pulled away. Gone within seconds, her shift ended an hour later. The city had grown dark again. Streetlights reflected across wet pavement. As she stepped outside, she reached into her pocket and touched the folded business card. Something about the encounter refused to leave her mind. Then her phone vibrated. A new message had arrived from an unknown number. There was no greeting, no explanation, just 7 words. "Stop looking for the owner immediately." Beneath the message sat a photograph, her photograph, taken less than an hour earlier while she worked inside the diner. Someone knew where she worked. Someone knew where she stood. And now someone wanted her to stop asking questions. Leah stared at the photograph on her phone while cold air drifted through the downtown streets. The image had been taken from inside the diner. Judging by the angle, whoever snapped it had been sitting only a few tables away. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark screen. Tired eyes, rain-soaked hair, a waitress carrying a coffee pot. Nothing special, nothing important. Yet somehow she had become the center of a mystery she did not understand. The message remained on the screen. "Stop looking for the owner immediately." No signature, no explanation, just a warning. Leah slipped the phone into her pocket and began walking home. The city lights blurred across puddles left behind by another evening shower. Traffic moved steadily along the avenue. People hurried past, carrying grocery bags and umbrellas. Everything looked normal. That made it worse. Whoever sent the message could have been anyone. The man who wanted the ring, someone watching from a distance. By the time she reached her apartment building, she had made up her mind. The message changed nothing. If anything, it made her more determined. The next morning, sunlight finally broke through the clouds for the first time all week. Leah sat at her kitchen table before work with a notebook, a cup of coffee, and the ring resting beside her. She studied every detail again. The crown, the strange lettering, the unusual weight. Nothing about it looked familiar. Then an idea occurred to her. Chicago had dozens of jewelry stores. Someone had to know something. After her shift ended that afternoon, she took a train across town to a family-owned jeweler that had been operating since the 1950s. Bells chimed softly as she entered. Glass display cases sparkled beneath warm lights. An elderly owner looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help you?" Leah placed the ring carefully on a velvet pad. "I found this. I was hoping you could tell me something about it." The man's smile disappeared the moment he saw it. He adjusted his glasses, leaned closer, then closer still. Several seconds passed. "Where did you get this?" Leah noticed the change immediately. "I found it." "Found it where?" "Near West Randolph." The jeweler straightened slowly. His expression had become unreadable. "Miss, I think you should take this back. You cannot identify it?" "No." The answer came too quickly. Leah frowned. "Please," his voice dropped. "Take it and leave." The warmth inside the store seemed to vanish. The man pushed the ring back toward her as if he did not want it near him. Leah slipped it into her pocket and left more confused than before. Outside, the afternoon sun had already begun sinking behind skyscrapers. She checked the time. Almost 6 o'clock. Her train station sat 3 blocks away. Halfway there, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time, the message contained only an address. No words, no explanation, just an address. Downtown, less than a mile away. Leah stopped walking. Every instinct told her to ignore it. Yet curiosity pulled harder than fear. 20 minutes later, she stood across the street from an underground parking structure. Cars entered and exited through a wide concrete ramp. Office workers hurried toward elevators. Nothing appeared unusual. Her phone buzzed once more. Level 3, space 72. Then silence. Leah almost turned around. She should have turned around. Instead, she entered the garage. Fluorescent lights cast long shadows across rows of parked vehicles. The sound of distant engines echoed through the concrete levels. She followed painted arrows until she reached space. Silver luxury sedan waited there. Beside it stood a man wearing a charcoal overcoat, mid-40s, perfect posture, expensive watch, calm expression as if he had been expecting her. "Miss Morgan," he said. "Thank you for coming." Leah stopped several feet away. "Who are you?" "Someone trying to save you time." He opened a small briefcase resting on the hood of the car. Bundles of cash filled the interior, more money than Leah had ever seen in one place. Her breath caught despite herself. "What is this?" The man smiled politely. "An offer. For the ring? For your inconvenience." Leah stared at the briefcase. Rent, student loans, medical bills from 2 years ago. Every financial problem in her life seemed to sit inside that case. The man watched carefully, waiting, measuring. "Take the money," he said. "Hand over the ring. Walk away." Leah slowly lifted her eyes from the cash. "And if I want to return it to the owner?" The man's smile faded. "Not completely, just and that would be unfortunate." "Why?" "Because some things are more valuable lost than found." Leah felt the same chill she had felt when she first discovered the ring beside the storm drain. Something hidden existed beneath every answer she received, something nobody wanted to explain. She took one step backward. "I am not selling it." For the first time, genuine disappointment crossed the man's face. He closed the briefcase. Click. The sound echoed through the garage. Then he looked directly at her and said the one thing she would not stop thinking about for the rest of the night. "They will find you soon." The strange thing was not that people wanted the ring. The strange thing was that nobody seemed willing to explain why. Leah barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the briefcase full of cash. Then she heard the man's voice again. "They will find you soon." Morning arrived under a pale blue sky. Sunlight spilled between the buildings outside her apartment, but it did little to ease the growing sense that she was being pulled towards something she could not see. During breakfast, she stared at the ring resting beside her coffee mug. It looked harmless, almost ordinary. Yet in less than 72 hours, strangers had offered money, sent warnings, and tracked her movements. For the first time, she considered taking it to the police. The thought lasted less than a minute. What would she tell them? That people were acting strangely around a lost ring? It sounded ridiculous even in her own head. By noon, she was back at the diner. The lunch crowd arrived early. Office workers filled booths. Conversations blended with the sound of dishes and coffee machines. Leah focused on work, at least she tried to. Every time the door opened, her eyes drifted toward it. Every unfamiliar face made her wonder whether another message was coming. Around 2 o'clock, the rush finally slowed. Emily disappeared into the kitchen. A few customers remained scattered throughout the dining room. That was when the bell above the entrance chimed again. Leah looked up automatically. The man who entered did not look like anyone who belonged in the diner. He wore a dark charcoal coat despite the mild weather outside. His posture was relaxed, confident, effortless. The afternoon sunlight followed him through the doorway, outlining broad shoulders and dark hair that looked almost black beneath the hanging lights. Several customers glanced his way before returning to their meals. Something about him naturally attracted attention. Leah grabbed a menu and approached. "Welcome, table for one?" The stranger smiled slightly. "Just coffee." His voice was calm, deep, familiar in a way she could not explain. Leah led him toward a booth, his eyes, pale grey, not blue, not silver, somewhere between the two. The color reminded her of winter clouds over Lake Michigan. "Coffee?" she asked. "Black." She nodded and headed toward the counter. Nothing unusual, just another customer. Yet she caught herself glancing toward him several times while filling orders. He never looked rushed, never checked his phone, never seemed distracted. Instead, he watched the city beyond the glass as though he had all minutes passed, then 30. Finally, Leah brought the refill. "Long day?" she asked casually. The stranger looked up. Amusement flickered across his face. "Long century." Leah blinked, then laughed. "That sounds exhausting. It has its moments." Something about the exchange felt unexpectedly easy, comfortable. The stranger accepted the coffee and thanked her. Most customers barely noticed servers. He did. For reasons she could not explain, that mattered. As she turned to leave, his gaze drifted toward the pocket of her apron, directly toward the place where she had tucked the ring before work. The smile faded from his face, only for an instant. Then it returned. "Interesting piece of jewelry," he said. Leah froze. "What jewelry?" "The one you carry." Her heartbeat quickened. "You can see it?" "Not exactly." He tilted his head slightly. "But I know it is there." Every instinct told her to end the conversation. Instead, curiosity won again. "Do you know who owns it?" For the first time, silence settled between them. The stranger looked toward the rain-dark clouds gathering beyond the window. Cars moved along the street below. Pedestrians hurried across crosswalks. The city continued unaware. "Perhaps, then why not tell me?" His eyes returned to hers, calm, steady, almost impossibly patient. "Because if I told you now, you would not believe me." Leah frowned. "Try me." A faint smile appeared again. "Not today." Before she could ask another question, the bell above the entrance chimed once more. 3 men entered the diner. All wore dark suits. All immediately scanned the room. The atmosphere shifted, subtly, like pressure building before a storm. Leah noticed it. So did the stranger. The men spotted him almost instantly. One started moving toward the booth. The stranger stood. "I should leave." "Wait." Leah lowered her voice. "Who are you?" For the first time, something unreadable crossed his expression. Sadness, perhaps. Then it vanished. "Someone who hopes you continue doing the right thing." He placed several bills on the table and walked toward the door. The 3 men stepped aside the moment he approached. Not because he asked, not because he spoke. They simply moved, as though it never occurred to them not to. Leah watched him disappear into the crowd outside. Moments later, she rushed to the window. The sidewalk was packed with people. Office workers, tourists, cyclists. The stranger was gone, completely gone. But resting beside the empty coffee cup sat something he had left behind, a folded napkin. Leah opened it carefully. Only 6 words were written inside. "Be careful who offers to buy it." Warnings were becoming easier to find than answers. Leah stared at the napkin long after the stranger had disappeared into the evening crowd. "Be careful who offers to buy it." 6 simple words, yet they carried more weight than any threat she had received so far. She folded the napkin and slipped it into her purse beside the ring. Outside, dark clouds rolled across the Chicago skyline. Another storm was coming. By the time her shift ended, rain was already tapping against the diner windows. The city glowed beneath reflections of red brake lights and neon signs. Leah stepped onto the sidewalk and headed toward the train station. The cold wind pushed at her jacket as she moved through the crowd. Every face looked ordinary. Every passerby seemed harmless. That was what made the situation so unsettling. The people interested in the ring never looked dangerous. They looked normal, professional, polite. That thought stayed with her as she descended into the elevated train station. The platform was crowded with commuters returning home. Phones glowed in tired hands. Conversations drifted through the air. A train arrived with a metallic screech. Doors opened. People stepped off. Others stepped on. Leah found a seat near the rear car and watched the city slide past the rain-streaked windows. 3 stops later, she noticed something strange. A man standing near the opposite door was looking directly at her. Not casually, not accidentally, deliberately. The moment their eyes met, he turned away. Leah told herself she was imagining things. Then she noticed another passenger farther down the car. A woman in a grey coat, also watching her. When the woman realized she had been noticed, she immediately looked toward the window. A knot tightened in Leah's stomach. At the next station, she exited early. The train doors closed behind her. Through the glass, she watched both strangers remain inside. Relief washed over her. Then she turned around and nearly collided with someone standing on the platform. Easy. The familiar voice stopped her cold. She looked up. The stranger from the diner stood beneath the station lights. Rain shimmered beyond the platform behind him. His dark coat looked untouched by the weather. His pale grey eyes held the same calm expression she remembered. You. A faint smile appeared. Good evening, Leah. Hearing her name from his lips should have felt alarming. Instead, it felt strangely expected. You know my name. Yes. And you know about the ring. Yes. Then maybe it is time you start explaining things. For a moment he seemed amused. Then his gaze shifted past her shoulder toward the train pulling away from the station. The amusement disappeared. Not here. Leah followed his eyes. Through the departing train windows, she caught sight of the man who had been watching her. He was staring directly at the platform, directly at them. Who are those people? She asked. People who want something they cannot have. The ring? Among other things. Rain rattled softly against the metal roof above them. The station had grown quieter. Most passengers had already left. The stranger stepped closer, lowering his voice. Have you considered that finding the owner may not be the safest choice? Everyone keeps saying things like that. Frustration finally broke through. Nobody tells me anything. They offer money. They send warnings. They follow me. Why? The stranger studied her for several seconds, not evaluating, simply observing. Then he asked a question she did not expect. Why have you not sold it? Leah blinked. What? You have been offered enough money to solve many problems, yet you keep refusing. She looked away toward the rain-dark city beyond the tracks. The answer felt obvious. Because it belongs to someone. The stranger became very still. Even now, especially now, something changed in his expression. It happened so quickly she almost missed it. Respect. Genuine respect. Then a distant sound echoed from the stairwell leading to the platform. Footsteps, more than one set. The stranger turned toward the noise. His eyes narrowed slightly. You need to leave. What now? You still have not told me who you are. The footsteps grew louder, closer. The stranger looked back at her. For the first time, she saw something resembling concern in those pale eyes. Trust me a little longer. Then he reached into his coat pocket and placed a business card in her hand. Black cardstock. No title, no company name, only a single address printed in silver lettering. Before Leah could ask another question, the station lights flickered once. She glanced toward the stairwell. When she looked back, the stranger was gone. Completely gone, as if he had never been there at all. Leah stared at the empty platform, then down at the card resting in her hand. The address belonged to a place overlooking Lake Michigan, and beneath it, written in elegant script, were 2 words that made her heart skip a beat. Luchiano Holdings. The address sat on Leah's kitchen table all night, like a question she could not stop reading. Luchiano Holdings. She had heard the name before. Almost everyone in Chicago had. The company owned office towers, luxury hotels, technology firms, and enough real estate to reshape entire neighborhoods. What she could not understand was why a stranger connected to that company seemed interested in a lost ring. By morning, curiosity had completely defeated caution. The black business card rested inside her purse beside the ring as she boarded a bus heading downtown. Gray clouds drifted above Lake Michigan. Sunlight reflected across glass skyscrapers rising from the shoreline. The closer she got to the address, the more unreal the situation felt. Leah Morgan was a waitress who worried about grocery prices and rent payments. She did not belong in the world of billion-dollar corporations. Yet less than an hour later, she stood across the street from one of the most impressive buildings she had ever seen. Luchiano Holdings occupied an entire tower overlooking the lake. Dark glass reflected the sky above. The entrance alone looked larger than her entire apartment building. People in expensive suits moved through revolving doors. Luxury vehicles lined the curb. For several minutes, Leah simply stood there. Then she took a breath and crossed the street. The lobby felt more like a museum than a corporate headquarters. Marble floors stretched beneath towering ceilings. Massive chandeliers reflected soft golden light. The air smelled faintly of cedar and expensive coffee. Behind the reception desk stood a woman in a navy suit. "Can I help you?" Leah hesitated. Then she produced the business card. The woman's expression changed immediately. Not surprise, recognition. "One moment, Miss Morgan." Leah froze. "You know my name?" The receptionist smiled politely. "Please take the private elevator on the right." Before Leah could ask another question, a security attendant appeared beside her. Not threatening, not forceful, simply waiting, as though her arrival had been expected. The elevator opened onto the top floor. The doors slid apart. Silence greeted her. The city stretched beyond floor-to-ceiling windows on every side. Lake Michigan shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. The view alone was breathtaking. Yet it was not the view that captured Leah's attention. It was the people. Several employees stood throughout the floor. Some worked quietly at desks. Others carried folders between offices. What struck her immediately was their behavior. Every person who passed seemed unusually careful, respectful, almost formal. A young assistant crossed the room carrying documents. The moment she noticed someone approaching from the far hallway, she stepped aside and lowered her gaze. Another employee did the same, then another. Leah followed their attention toward the hallway entrance. Her heartbeat quickened. The stranger from the diner emerged into view. He wore a dark suit this time, no overcoat, no rain, yet somehow he looked even more composed than before. The sunlight pouring through the windows illuminated sharp features and dark hair. Conversation softened as he passed. Employees nodded respectfully. Some appeared nervous. None ignored him. Leah watched the scene unfold in silence. The stranger finally reached her side. A faint smile appeared. "You came. You knew I would. I hoped you would." Leah glanced around the room. "Who exactly are you?" Before he could answer, a middle-aged executive hurried toward them carrying a stack of folders. He stopped several feet away. "Good afternoon, sir." The executive's posture immediately straightened. Respect radiated from every word. The stranger accepted the folders without looking away from Leah. "Thank you." The executive nodded once and departed. Leah folded her arms. "People seem very careful around you. Do they? You know they do." Amusement flickered briefly across his face. Then he gestured toward a private conference room overlooking the lake. "Come, there are things we should discuss." Leah followed reluctantly. Inside, the room felt quieter than the rest of the building. A long table stretched toward the windows. The stranger pulled out a chair for her before taking a seat across from her. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Leah placed the ring on the table between them. Golden light reflected across its surface. The stranger's expression became unreadable. "You know what this is," Leah said. "Yes." "You know who owns it?" "Yes." "Then tell me." Silence filled the room. Outside, clouds drifted across the lake. Somewhere far below, traffic moved through downtown Chicago. The stranger studied the ring for several seconds before lifting his eyes toward hers. He looked as though he were deciding something important. Then the conference room door opened unexpectedly. An older woman entered carrying documents. The moment she saw the stranger, she stopped. Her expression softened instantly. "Your Majesty," she said respectfully, "the council has arrived." The room fell silent. Leah stared at the woman, then at the stranger, then back again. The title echoed through her mind, "Your Majesty." The stranger did not correct her. Some truths change your life the moment you hear them. Leah sat frozen as the words echoed through the conference room. "Your Majesty." The older woman remained standing near the doorway, holding a stack of documents against her chest. Her expression showed no confusion, no hesitation. She had spoken the title naturally, as if she had done so 1,000 times before. Across the table, the stranger remained completely calm. He did not deny it, he did not laugh, he did not explain. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Leah looked from the woman to the man sitting opposite her. Suddenly, dozens of small details rushed back into focus. The way employees moved aside when he walked through the building, the way people lowered their voices around him, the way strangers seemed willing to offer enormous amounts of money to recover the ring. Even the pale grey eyes that always appeared to know more than they should. Every strange moment now pointed toward the same impossible conclusion. "Leave us," the stranger said quietly. The woman nodded immediately. "Of course, Your Majesty." Seconds later, the door closed behind her. Silence returned. The city stretched beyond the glass walls. Lake Michigan shimmered beneath drifting clouds. Somewhere below, thousands of people moved through ordinary lives, completely unaware of the conversation taking place high above them. Leah finally found her voice. "Your Majesty?" The stranger folded his hands calmly on the table. "Yes, that is not a real answer. It is the truth." Leah stared at him. Every rational part of her mind wanted to reject what she was hearing. Kings belonged in history books, in movies, not inside skyscrapers overlooking Chicago. "Who are you?" she asked. The stranger held her gaze. "My name is Sebastian Luchiano." Leah recognized the last name instantly, the owner of Luchiano Holdings, one of the most powerful men in the country. Yet somehow she knew that was not the whole answer, and a faint smile touched his face, not amused, resigned. "And I am the king of the vampire court." The words should have sounded ridiculous. Instead, they landed with unsettling clarity. Too many pieces suddenly fit together. Too many mysteries finally made sense. The warnings, the secrecy, the fear. Leah leaned back slowly. "You expect me to believe vampires are real?" "No." Sebastian glanced toward the ring resting between them. "I expect you to believe your own experiences." Leah followed his gaze. The ring gleamed beneath the afternoon light. She thought about the jeweler who refused to touch it, the men offering money, the people watching her. None of it had ever made sense before. Now it almost did, almost. "Then why tell me?" she asked. Sebastian looked toward the city beyond the glass. "Because you deserve the truth." The answer surprised her, not because of what he said, because he sounded sincere. For a moment neither spoke. Then the conference room door opened again. This time 3 individuals entered, 2 men and 1 woman, all impeccably dressed, all carrying the same composed expression. Yet the moment their eyes landed on Leah, some curiosity, disapproval, concern. The woman spoke first. "She should not be here." Sebastian's expression hardened slightly. "She stays, Your Majesty." One of the men replied carefully, "The council disagrees." Leah looked between them, another piece of the puzzle. The group gathered around the far end of the table. None appeared happy about her presence. One elderly gentleman adjusted his glasses and studied the ring. "Is that truly the one?" he asked quietly. Sebastian nodded. The room became noticeably still. The council members exchanged glances. Leah watched the reactions carefully. Respect, anxiety, something close to disbelief. Then she must surrender it immediately. Leah instinctively placed her hand over the ring. The gesture surprised everyone, including herself. The woman frowned. "That does not belong to you." "I know," Leah replied. "That is why I have been trying to return it." Silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, Sebastian smiled, not at the council, at her. It was the first genuine smile she had seen from him. Small, brief, real. The council members noticed it too. The elderly gentleman looked toward Sebastian. "Your Majesty, perhaps it is time she learned what she is actually carrying." The room grew quiet once more. Sebastian's eyes returned to the ring. His smile vanished. For the first time since Leah met him, he looked troubled. "Not yet," he said softly. But as Leah stared at the golden band resting beneath her fingertips, she realized one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever secret the ring held, even a king seemed afraid of it. The truth was finally within reach, yet everyone in the room seemed afraid to touch it. Leah sat quietly as the council members exchanged uneasy glances. The golden ring remained beneath her hand on the polished conference table. Outside, late afternoon sunlight drifted across Lake Michigan, casting long reflections against the glass walls. Inside, the atmosphere felt completely different, heavy, careful, almost ceremonial. Sebastian Luchiano rose from his chair and walked toward the windows. For several moments he simply stood there looking out over the city. The council remained silent. Nobody interrupted him. Nobody questioned him. It was the kind of silence that existed around people who had carried authority for a very long time. Finally he turned back toward the table. "She deserves to know," he said. The woman from the council folded her arms. "The moment she learns the truth, everything changes." "Everything already changed when she found it," Sebastian replied. No one argued. The statement felt less like an opinion and more like a fact. "Would someone please explain what is happening?" An elderly council member adjusted his glasses and slowly leaned forward. "For 2 centuries, that ring has been known as the Royal Oath Ring." The room grew still. "It is not valuable because of gold," he continued. "It is valuable because of what it represents." Leah glanced down at the ring. Suddenly it looked older than before. Older than the city outside. Older than the buildings, she asked. The elderly man hesitated. Then Sebastian answered instead. "Trust." The single word surprised her. Trust? Sebastian returned to his seat. Long ago, the royal oath ring belonged to the first ruler of our court. Over time it became more than jewelry, it became a symbol, a measure of character. Leah frowned. I still do not understand. Sebastian nodded toward the ring. For 200 years it has occasionally been allowed to disappear. The statement sounded absurd, yet nobody in the room reacted. They had heard it before many times. Allowed? Leah repeated. Yes. Sebastian's gaze never left hers. It is found, lost, found again. Different cities, different people, different generations. Understanding began forming slowly, like sunlight breaking through clouds. You mean this was intentional? Yes. The councilwoman spoke before Sebastian could continue. Most people keep it. Another council member nodded. Others sell it, some hide it, some lie about finding it. Each voice added another piece, another disappointment, another failure. Leah listened in silence. How many people have found it? She finally asked. The room became quiet again. Sebastian answered. More than 300. Her breath caught. 300. 300 opportunities. 300 choices. Then another realization arrived. And all of them failed? Nobody spoke immediately. The answer was obvious. Sebastian's expression softened slightly. Until now, the words hung in the air between them. Leah looked away. The compliment felt uncomfortable. She had not done anything extraordinary. She had simply tried to return something that was not hers. Yet judging by the faces around the table, that simple decision mattered far more than she realized. The councilwoman still looked unconvinced. One decision does not reveal a person's soul. No, Sebastian agreed quietly, but it reveals where they begin. The room fell silent once more. Beyond the windows, the sun continued its slow descent toward the horizon. Golden light filled the conference room. For the first time since entering the tower, Leah felt the mystery shifting. The pieces were finally connecting. The warnings, the money, the strangers, the attention. None of it had ever been about the ring itself. It had always been about the choice. Then she noticed something carved inside the band. Tiny lettering hidden beneath the crown symbol. What does this say? She asked. Sebastian looked down at the inscription. For the first time all afternoon, genuine emotion crossed his face. Not fear, not concern, something older, sadder. That, he said softly, is the reason the test began in the first place. The council members immediately exchanged looks, uneasy looks, careful looks, as though a far more important secret had just entered the room, and suddenly Leah realized the mystery was not over at all. It had only reached its true beginning. Some stories begin with a treasure, others begin with a mistake. The inscription inside the ring had started with heartbreak. Evening settled over Chicago by the time Leah left the conference room. The council had departed. Employees were disappearing floor by floor. Sunlight faded from gold to deep orange beyond the windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Yet one question continued echoing through her mind. Why had the test begun? Sebastian offered no answer inside the conference room. Instead, he invited her to follow him through a private elevator that descended below the main floors of Luchiano Holdings. The ride was silent, neither spoke. The city noise gradually disappeared behind layers of steel and stone. When the elevator doors finally opened, Leah stepped into a completely different world. The space resembled neither an office nor a corporate archive. Long hallways stretched beneath vaulted ceilings lined with warm amber lights. Dark wood shelves filled entire walls. Ancient books rested beside glass display cases. Paintings older than America itself hung quietly between stone columns. The air carried the scent of leather, cedar, and thyme. Leah slowed her pace. What is this place? Sebastian walked beside her. Our historical archives. Under a skyscraper, it seemed safer than a castle. The faint smile accompanying the comment surprised her. For the first time, he sounded less like a king and more like an ordinary man making a dry observation. The realization felt strangely comforting. They continued through the archive until they reached a circular room at the very center. A glass ceiling revealed the first stars appearing above Chicago. In the middle of the room stood a display pedestal illuminated by soft light. Sebastian placed the ring upon it. The gold immediately reflected across the glass. 200 years ago, he began quietly, the ring belonged to my predecessor. Leah listened carefully. He believed trust was the most valuable thing a ruler could possess. Sebastian's eyes remained fixed on the ring. Unfortunately, trust was also the easiest thing to lose. His voice carried a weight that had not been there before. Something personal, something remembered. Leah approached the pedestal. What happened? For several seconds, Sebastian said nothing. Then he reached into a drawer beneath the display and removed a weathered journal. The leather cover had faded with age. He opened it carefully and turned to a marked page. The inscription inside the ring comes from this journal. Leah looked down. The handwriting flowed across yellowed paper in elegant script. What does it say? Sebastian closed the journal before handing it to her. Trust reveals character long before power reveals intentions. The words sounded simple, yet the moment she heard them, she understood why they had survived 2 centuries. The room fell quiet again. Finally, Leah asked the question she had been avoiding. Why continue the test for 200 years? Sebastian's gaze shifted toward the glass ceiling above them, toward the stars slowly appearing beyond the city lights. Because nobody passed, Leah frowned. 300 people failed. More than 300. The answer carried no anger, only disappointment, ancient disappointment, the kind that had accumulated over decades and generations. Leah studied him carefully. For the first time since meeting him, she noticed how tired he looked, not physically tired, something deeper than that. As though centuries had gradually worn away his faith in people. You expected everyone to disappoint you, she said softly. Sebastian looked at her. The silence that followed felt answer enough. What she did not know was that, less than a mile away, another meeting was taking place at that exact moment. Inside a private penthouse overlooking the river, several individuals sat around a polished table. Documents lay scattered before them. One photograph sat in the center, Leah's photograph. A man in a dark suit studied it carefully. Another nodded, and the king continues to protect her. The room grew tense. Then perhaps he already knows. Back beneath Luchiano Holdings, Leah remained unaware of any of it. She walked slowly around the circular archive room, absorbing centuries of history hidden beneath a modern city. Everywhere she looked, evidence of long lives surrounded her. Paintings, records, artifacts, stories. Finally, she stopped beside Bat again. You know something, she said. Something you still have not told me. His expression became unreadable. Not defensive, not surprised. Simply resigned. Yes, Leah folded her arms. And what is it? Sebastian glanced toward the ring resting beneath the light. Then toward the journal, then back to her. For the first time all evening, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Because, he said quietly, the truth is not about the people who failed the test. He paused. It is about why I believed nobody ever could pass it. For 2 centuries, the test had never truly been about the ring. Leah stood beneath the glass ceiling of the archive and watched the city lights emerge beyond the night sky. Sebastian's final words lingered between them. The truth is not about the people who failed the test. It is about why I believed nobody ever could pass it. The statement felt heavier than everything she had learned so far. He was not talking about history anymore. He was talking about himself. Silence settled over the circular chamber. Somewhere above them, Chicago continued moving through another ordinary evening. Cars crossed bridges, trains rattled through stations, restaurant windows glowed against dark streets. Yet beneath the city, time seemed to slow. Leah looked toward the ring resting under soft light. You stopped believing in people. It was not really a question. Sebastian gave a faint nod. A long time ago. His voice remained calm, but something in it felt older than before, older than the building, older than the city. Leah remembered every warning, every offer, every person who had tried to obtain the ring. 300 people over 2 centuries. Because everyone disappointed you? Sebastian considered the question. Not everyone. He glanced toward a nearby display case containing centuries-old documents. Enough. The answer carried no bitterness. Somehow that made it sadder. Leah slowly walked through the archive. Portraits lined the walls. Generations of faces watched from gilded frames. Some appeared noble, others thoughtful. A few looked lonely. The longer she remained here, the more she realized how different time must feel to someone who had lived for centuries. Most people measured life in years. Sebastian measured it in eras. Then why continue the test, she asked. Why not stop? He looked toward the ring. Because part of me hoped I was wrong. Leah stopped walking. The honesty surprised her. Kings were supposed to sound certain, powerful, unshakable. Yet the man standing before her sounded something else, inhuman. At that exact moment, far above them, members of the Vampire Council gathered once more inside a private chamber. Several documents rested on a polished table. Leah's photograph remained among them. Reports are confirmed, one council member said quietly. She rejected every offer, another nodded, including amounts that would have changed her life. The room fell silent. Finally, the councilwoman from earlier spoke. Then she may truly be the first. Back in the archive, Leah remained unaware of the conversation. Her attention had shifted toward a nearby display case. Inside rested dozens of photographs collected across decades. Men, women, different cities, different generations. A small plaque beneath the collection explained their significance. Previous finders of the royal oath ring. Leah stared at the faces. Hundreds of ordinary people. Teachers, business owners, students, travelers. Some smiled confidently, others looked nervous. Yet none had completed the journey she was now living. You kept records of all of them. Sebastian joined her beside the display. Everyone. Why? His reflection appeared beside hers in the glass. Because each time I hoped the outcome would be different. Leah studied the photographs again. Suddenly one realization struck her. You never expected me to return it. For the first time, Sebastian did not answer immediately. The silence itself became the answer. She looked up. Even after everything? Especially after everything. The words landed softly, yet they explained more than any speech could have. 2 centuries of disappointment had convinced him that trust was naive, that kindness always had limits, that eventually everyone chose themselves. Leah glanced back toward the ring, toward the decision that had started this entire journey. She had never viewed it as a test, never viewed herself as special. She simply believed lost things should be returned. Sebastian watched her quietly. Then something unexpected happened. The lights within the archive dimmed slight room. An assistant appeared at the entrance. Runs. Your Majesty, Sebastian turned. What is it? The assistant hesitated. The council has reached a decision. The room grew still. What decision? The assistant looked briefly toward Leah before answering. They want her formally recognized tomorrow. Even Sebastian appeared surprised. And for the first time since entering the hidden world beneath Chicago, Leah realized the choice she had made beside a storm drain might be about to change far more than her own life. Recognition should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like the beginning of a choice neither of them could avoid. The following evening, Leah stood near a tall window at the top of Luchiano Holdings. The city stretched beneath her like a sea of lights. Cars moved along distant streets. Reflections shimmered across Lake Michigan. Somewhere below, millions of people continued their lives without ever knowing a hidden world existed beside their own. The formal council gathering was scheduled for the next morning, yet neither Leah nor Sebastian seemed eager to discuss it. The observatory was quiet except for the soft ticking of an antique clock and the distant hum of the city below. Leah rested her hands against the cool railing and watched clouds drift across the stars. You seem worried, she said without looking at him. Sebastian stood several feet away beside a large telescope pointed toward the night sky. Perhaps about the council? No, that answer surprised her. She turned toward him. His expression remained calm, but something in his eyes felt different tonight. Less guarded, more honest. The silence stretched between them before he finally spoke again. The council's decision is simple, mine is not. Leah frowned slightly. I do not understand. Sebastian walked toward the window overlooking the city. For a moment he simply stared at the skyline. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter than usual. For 200 years I told myself the test existed to measure others. Leah listened carefully, but that was not completely true. The confession seemed difficult for him, not because he feared judgment, because he rarely allowed himself to say it aloud. Then why did it really exist? Sebastian's reflection appeared beside hers in the glass. Because I stopped believing trust was worth the risk. The words settled heavily in the room. Leah remained silent. He continued. Every generation gave me another reason to expect disappointment. Every failure reinforced what I already believed. Eventually, the test became less about hope and more about proof. Proof of what? She asked softly. His gaze lowered briefly. That I was right. The answer broke something in the image she had built of him, not because it made him weaker, because it made him human. For centuries, he had carried power, responsibility, and authority. Yet beneath all of it was a man who had become afraid of believing in people again. The realization filled the room with a different kind of silence. Not uncomfortable, sad, honest. And then I found the ring, Leah said. Sebastian looked at her. Yes. You thought I would fail too, without question. There was no cruelty in the admission, only truth. Leah almost laughed. That is not exactly flattering. A faint smile appeared on his face. No, it is not. For the first time that evening, some of the tension eased. The city lights reflected across the glass around them. Beyond the window, a plane crossed the night sky like a distant star. Leah studied him for several moments. Then what changed? Sebastian did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the skyline, toward the city he had watched evolve across centuries. Finally, he spoke. You never treated the ring as an opportunity. His voice remained calm. You treated it as a responsibility. Leah looked away. To her, the decision had always felt simple. Yet hearing it described that way made her realize how uncommon it had become. Sebastian stepped closer to the window. Do you know what surprised me most? She shook her head. You never asked what you would gain. The observatory grew quiet again. The clock continued ticking softly. Somewhere below, sirens echoed faintly through the city. Then Sebastian said the one thing he had apparently never admitted to anyone before. Leah, I did not continue the test because I believed someone would pass. His eyes met hers. I continued it because I wanted to be proven wrong. The honesty of the confession left no room for misunderstanding. For the first time since finding the ring, every mystery finally aligned into a single truth. This had never been a story about a lost object. It had always been a story about a man who no longer believed trust existed, and a woman who returned something simply because it was the right thing to do. And as the city lights shimmered beneath the stars, Leah realized the council ceremony waiting for them tomorrow was no longer the question that mattered. The real question was what happened after the test was finally over. The hardest choices are often the ones nobody can force you to make. Rain fell gently across Chicago the next afternoon as Leah stood at the edge of the council chamber overlooking Lake Michigan. The ceremony had ended less than an hour earlier. Representatives of the vampire court had formally acknowledged what nobody thought possible. After 200 years and hundreds of attempts, someone had finally returned the royal oath ring without demanding money, status, influence, or reward. The recognition should have felt overwhelming. Instead, Leah felt strangely calm. The mystery was solved. Yet one final decision remained. The council chamber slowly emptied as members departed in small groups. Some glanced toward Leah with curiosity, others with respect. A few still seemed uncertain what to think of her. None of that mattered. Her attention remained fixed on the ring resting inside a velvet box near the center of the room. It looked exactly the same as the night she found it beside a storm drain. The only thing that had changed was everything around it. You are quiet. Sebastian's voice carried softly through the nearly empty chamber. Leah turned. He stood near the windows, hands folded behind his back as rain traced thin lines across the glass beyond him. The grey afternoon sky reflected across the lake. I have been thinking. About the council? About what comes next? Sebastian nodded slightly, a reasonable concern. Leah walked toward the velvet box. The ring reflected the muted light above. Everyone keeps acting like I accomplished something extraordinary. You did. She shook her head. I returned something that was not mine. A faint smile appeared on his face. That is exactly why it matters. For a moment neither spoke. The chamber felt peaceful now, free from tension, free from secrets. The long journey that began in a rainy alley finally seemed close to ending. Leah carefully lifted the ring from the box. The gold felt familiar against her fingertips. Familiar and strangely distant at the same time. She looked toward Sebastian. May I ask you something? Anything? Sebastian studied her for several seconds. Then he answered honestly. No, the answer surprised her. No, the test ended the moment you chose to return it. Whatever happens now is your decision. Leah looked back at the ring, the object that had brought strangers into her life, the object that had introduced her to secrets hidden beneath an entire city, the object that had forced a king to confront his own doubts. For a brief moment she imagined keeping it, not because she wanted power, not because she wanted wealth, simply because it had become part of her story. Then she smiled softly. It still belongs here. Sebastian's eyes never left her. Leah stepped forward and carefully placed the ring back into the velvet box. The gesture was simple, quiet, final. No ceremony followed, no dramatic announcement. Yet somehow it felt more important than everything that came before. The choice was complete. She had found the owner. She had returned what was lost. The story should have ended there. Rain continued tapping gently against the windows. Sebastian approached slowly. You realize you could walk away now. Leah looked up. I know. No obligations, no expectations. I know. Another silence passed between them, not awkward, comfortable, honest. Then Leah asked the question that had quietly existed beneath every conversation since the observatory. And what if I do not want to walk away? Something shifted in Sebastian's expression. Not surprise, hope, genuine hope. The kind he had spent 2 centuries trying not to feel. Outside, thunder rolled softly across the distant lake. Inside, neither looked away. The ring no longer stood between them. The test no longer stood between them. Only a choice remained, and for the first time since finding the ring, Leah realized she was no longer deciding what to do with a lost object. She was deciding what to do with the future waiting in front of her. Rain was falling again when Leah left Luchiano Holdings that evening, not the heavy storm that had greeted her the night everything began, just a soft spring rain drifting through the city like a memory. She stepped onto the sidewalk and paused beneath the glow of a street lamp. Cars moved steadily through downtown Chicago. Reflections shimmered across wet pavement. The familiar sounds of the city surrounded her. Yet everything felt different now. The mystery was over. The secrets had been revealed. The ring had been returned. For the first time in days, there was nowhere she needed to go and nothing she needed to solve. She stood quietly, watching raindrops ripple across puddles gathered along the curb. Then she heard footsteps behind her. She did not need to turn around to know who it was. Sebastian stopped beside her. Neither spoke immediately. The silence felt comfortable, honest. The kind of silence that only exists after two people have finally stopped hiding the truth from each other. Together they looked out across the rain-soaked street. "This is where it started," Leah said softly. Sebastian followed her gaze. The sidewalk stretched beneath silver reflections. Not exactly, a faint smile touched his face. The alley was 3 blocks west. Leah laughed quietly. "You know what I mean, yes," he said. "I do." The city lights reflected in his pale eyes. For a moment he seemed lost in thought. "You changed something important." Leah shook her head. "I returned a ring." "No," his voice remained calm. "Certain, you reminded me why it existed." The rain continued falling around them, gentle, steady. Leah looked down at the pavement. She thought about the woman she had been a few weeks earlier, a waitress rushing home after late shifts, someone who worried about rent, overdue bills, and whether she could afford new shoes when her old ones finally wore out. She had believed her life was small, ordinary, invisible. Now she understood something she had never seen before. A person's worth was not measured by power, money, or titles. It was measured by the choices nobody was watching. The choices made when doing the right thing offered no reward. Sebastian seemed to understand her thoughts without hearing them. "The council offered you anything you wanted." Leah nodded. "They did, yet you asked for nothing." She looked up at him. "I already got what I wanted." For the first time, genuine surprise crossed his face. And what was Leah smiled? The truth. The answer lingered between them. Then something unexpected happened. Sebastian laughed softly, not politely, not formally. A real laugh, brief but genuine. Leah realized she had never heard it before. Neither, perhaps, had many others. The sound seemed to erase centuries of distance from his expression. Rain tapped against nearby windows. Headlights drifted through the mist. The world continued moving around them. Finally, Sebastian spoke. "There is one more truth I should tell you." Leah raised an eyebrow. "After everything, there is still another one?" "Just one." He looked toward the city for a moment before returning his gaze to hers. "When I first learned someone had found the ring, I expected another disappointment." Leah smiled knowingly. "You already told me that." "Not all of it." His expression softened. "I expected to forget your name within a week." The confession made her laugh. "That is not very flattering either." "No, but it is honest." The rain began to ease. Clouds slowly drifted apart overhead. Beyond the skyline, the first traces of sunrise-colored light appeared along the horizon, even though night had not fully surrendered yet. The storm was ending. Leah looked up at the clearing sky, then back at the man beside her. No crown rested on his head. No ceremony surrounded him. No title mattered in that moment. He was simply Sebastian and she was simply Leah. Two people standing on the same sidewalk where fate had quietly altered both of their lives. The distance that once separated their worlds no longer existed. The test was over. The mystery was solved. The future remained unwritten, yet neither seemed afraid of it anymore. Together they began walking through the fading rain. Behind them the city lights reflected across wet pavement. Ahead of them, dawn waited beyond the clouds. And somewhere safe inside the archives beneath Chicago, the royal oath ring had finally found its way home. But in the end, the ring was never the most important thing that had been returned. Trust had found its way home too.